Good afternoon from Sacred Space at Titania's Realm. It's still the 7th of October and the time is now 5:54 p.m. So good afternoon or almost good evening according to whatever space-time continuum you happen to exist in here on planet Earth or wherever else our video and etheric radio and video waves reach. It's a bit of a weird thought, isn't it? But anyway, out in deep space, no one can hear you scream, or so they say. It's supposed to be a vacuum, so they say. But I've never been there, so I can't really speak from personal categoric experience. It's been a scathing hot day. It's still 26 degrees. I've been out cleaning the fish pond filter and took Charlie out with me to assist me, which means she gets to sit in a gardenia bush and be a wild bird for a few moments while I fiddle about with that. And yeah, I came in. I've got to buy some new garden hoses because the ones I've got are kind of manky and rotted through. So it's another job I'll have to do, and I've got quite a few jobs to do in the garden. But here I am instead, making a video for YouTube and virtual reality, because all of existence is illusion and none of this is real. Tell that to you passing a kidney stone or having gallbladder attacks or whatever, giving birth or suffering severe incontinence. Suddenly it all becomes very, very real indeed. It's amazing, isn't it, what pain can bring you back down to reality. Sometimes ecstasy can bring you back down to reality too, depending on who you're creating ecstasy with, I guess. Certainly didn't get much of that with my ex-husband, but never mind, that's a whole other story. And we're making beautiful stories for my beautiful future life, am I right? We're just gonna slough off the past. Slough the fuck off. So, on the subject of beautiful stories, yeah, it's been a very quiet day. Getting myself busy as I always do. Kind of on the verge of anarchy and chaos because I get bored after a while. I should have gone out today somewhere because it's such a beautiful day, but I got myself occupied, sorting through some kind of weird notes, my trance drumming notes, trying to sort out what's real and what's, imagination, and it's hard. It's hard. I don't tend to invest too much in it because you just don't know. You don't know what's real, and if you don't know, you don't know. No point wasting time on that. But anyway, sort of working through that because I thought I'll print them out and then I can go back to them, when as time takes time and things unfurl, see what's utter nonsense and what's reality checks. Yeah. Yeah, baby. Anyway, I've decided to carry on with reading from the Sympathetic Magic, which is about another 20 pages to go. But I got actually cut off by my laptop, said couldn't do videos longer than we were in at 2 hours and 45 minutes when it chopped us off. So I knew I'd have to come back, and I was going to come back and do it tomorrow, but I'm bored. I've got nothing better to do. Well, I've got lots of things I could be doing, like making jewellery or sorting out stuff, but I thought, no, fuck it. I'll come back and I'll read to you again because, takes up my days. Just biding time, taking up days and hours and minutes and what have you. And anyway, I don't mind. I don't mind reading things out loud, and I'm learning things too while I'm reading out to you. So it's a symbiosis that benefits you and me, babies, and it's all good. It's like my dance, I dance like a crazy person. People look at me and go, "Who's that crazy woman?" But I reach catharsis and get into the zone and I come back really creative. So it has its benefits, you know. So it's all good. Life is good, life is beautiful, it's all a grand illusion, but life is beautiful and good. So anyway, I continue with sympathetic magic, and we got chopped off down near the bottom of page 44, so we're starting from page 44. If you happen to have the same exact copy as me, you can follow along. If you don't, you can close your eyes and think of Aussie or wherever you are on planet Earth. And some of you probably just listen to my voice droning on and on. It probably helps put you to sleep or something. I don't know what it's doing for you, but anyway, as I said, I'm gaining something out of it. You're gaining something out of it, and it's a beautiful thing, one way or the other. Even if you sleep through everything, you need a rest, don't you? Everyone needs a rest. So I continue on. Again, the Greeks believed in a stone which cured snake bites, and hence was named the snake stone. To test its efficacy, you had only to grind the stone to powder and sprinkle the powder on the wound. The wine-coloured amethyst received its name, which means not drunken, because it was supposed to keep the wearer of it sober. Oh, that's interesting. And two brothers who desired to live at unity were advised to carry magnets about with them, which, by drawing the twain together, would clearly prevent them from falling out. Well, there you go. The ancient books of the Hindus lay down a rule that after sunset on his marriage night, a man should sit silent with his wife till the stars begin to twinkle in the sky. When the pole star appears, he should point it out to her and, addressing the star, say, "Firm art thou, I see thee, the firm one. Firm be thou with me, O thriving one." Then, turning to his wife, he should say, "To me Brihaspati has given thee, obtaining offspring through me, thy husband. Live with me 100 autumns." The intention of this ceremony is plainly to guard against the fickleness of fortune and the instability of earthly bliss by the steadfast influence of the constant star. It is a wish expressed in Keats's last sonnet. Bright star, would I were steadfast as thou art, not in lone splendour hung aloft the night. Dwellers by the sea cannot fail to be impressed by the sight of its ceaseless ebb and flow, and are apt, on the principles of that rude philosophy of sympathy and resemblance, which here engages our attention, to trace a subtle relation, a secret harmony between its tides and the life of man, of animals, and of plants. In the flowing tide they see not merely a symbol, but a cause of exuberance, of prosperity, and of life, while in the ebbing tide they discern a real agent as well as a melancholy emblem of failure, of weakness, and of death. The Breton peasant fancies that clover sown when the tide is coming in will grow well, but that if the plant be sown at low water or when the tide is going out, it will never reach maturity, and that the cows which feed on it will burst. His wife believes that the best butter is made when the tide has just turned and is beginning to flow, that milk which foams in the churn will go on foaming till the hour of high water is past, and that water drawn from the well or milk extracted from the cow while the tide is rising will boil up in the pot or saucepan and overflow into the fire. According to some of the ancients, the skins of seals, even after they had been parted from their bodies, remained in secret sympathy with the sea, and were observed to ruffle when the tide was on the ebb. Another ancient belief attributed to Aristotle was that no creature can die except at ebb tide. The belief, if we can trust Pliny, was confirmed by experience so far as regards human beings on the coast of France. Philostratus also assures us that at Cadiz, dying people never yielded up the ghost while the water was high. It's very interesting. I hadn't really observed that, but there you go. A like fancy still lingers in some parts of Europe. On the Cantabrian coast, they think that persons who die of chronic or acute disease expire at the moment when the tide begins to recede. In Portugal, all along the coast of Wales, and on some parts of the coast of Brittany, a belief is said to prevail that people are born when the tide comes in and die when it goes out. Dickens attests the existence of the same superstition in England. People can't die along the coast, said Mr. Peggotty, except when the tide's pretty nigh out. They can't be born until it's pretty nigh in, not properly born till flood. The belief that most deaths happen at ebb tide is said to be held along the east coast of England from Northumberland to Kent. Shakespeare must have been familiar with it, for he makes Falstaff die, even just between 12 and 1, e'en at the turning of the tide. We meet the belief again on the Pacific coast of North America among the Haidas. Whenever a good Haida is about to die, he sees a canoe manned by some of his dead friends who come with the tide to bid him welcome to the spirit land. Come with us now, they say, for the tide is about to ebb and we must depart. At Port Stephens in New South Wales, the natives always buried their dead at flood tide, never at ebb, lest the retiring water should bear the soul of the departed to some distant country. To ensure a long life, the Chinese have recourse to certain complicated charms, which concentrate in themselves the magical essence emanating on homeopathic principles from times and seasons, from persons and from things. The vehicles employed to transmit these happy influences are no other than grave clothes. These are provided by many Chinese in their lifetime, and most people have them cut out and sewn by an unmarried girl or a very young woman, wisely calculating that, since such a person is likely to live a great many years to come, a part of her capacity to live long must surely pass into the clothes, and thus stave off for many years the time when they shall be put to their proper use. Further, the garments are made by preference in a year which has an intercalary month, for to the Chinese mind it seems plain that grave clothes made in a year which is unusually long will possess the capacity of prolonging life in an unusually high degree. Among the clothes, there is one robe in particular on which special pains have been lavished to imbue it with this priceless quality. It is a long silken gown of the deepest blue colour with the word longevity embroidered all over it in thread of gold. To present an aged parent with one of these costly and splendid mantles known as longevity garments is esteemed by the Chinese as an act of filial piety and a delicate mark of attention. As the garment purports to prolong the life of its owner, he often wears it, especially on festive occasions, in order to allow the influence of longevity created by the many golden letters with which it is bespangled to work their full effect upon his person. On his birthday, above all, he hardly ever fails to don it, for in China common sense bids a man lay in a large stock of vital energy on his birthday, to be expended in the form of health and vigour during the rest of the year. Attired in the gorgeous pall and absorbing its blessed influence at every pore, the happy owner receives complacently the congratulations of friends and relatives, who warmly express their admiration for these magnificent cerements and the filial piety which prompted the children to bestow so beautiful and useful a present on the author of their being. Another application of the maxim that like produces like is seen in the Chinese belief that the fortunes of a town are deeply affected by its shape, and that they must vary according to the character of the thing which that shape most nearly resembles. Thus, it is related that long ago the town of Suen Chiu Fu, the outlines of which are like those of a carp, frequently fell a prey to the depredations of the neighbouring city of Yongchung, which is shaped like a fishing net, until the inhabitants of the former town conceived a plan of erecting 2 tall pagodas in their midst. These pagodas, which still tower above the city of Suen Chiu Fu, have ever since exercised their happiest influence over its destiny by intercepting the imaginary net before it could descend and entangle in its meshes the imaginary carp. Some 40 years ago, the wise men of Shanghai were much exercised to discover the cause of a local rebellion. To be very exercised means they were absolutely furious or livid or angry about something. On careful inquiry, they ascertained that the rebellion was due to the shape of a large new temple, which had most unfortunately been built in the shape of a tortoise, an animal of the very worst character. Oh, I wouldn't say that. I had a pet turtle for a while. He was a very pleasant fellow till he died. Then he was unpleasant, but not by choice. Just, slowly decaying with death. But anyway, strange thing to think that a tortoise is an unpleasant, worst character. Anyway, we carry on. This is not my story. I didn't write it, so go with the flow, babies. The difficulty was serious. The danger was pressing, for to pull down the temple would have been impious, and to let it stand as it was would be to court a succession of similar or worse disasters. However, the genius of the local professors of geomancy, rising to the occasion, triumphantly surmounted the difficulty and obviated the danger by filling up 2 wells which represented the eyes of the tortoise that once blinded that disreputable animal and rendered him incapable of doing further mischief. Must be a cultural thing. I don't understand, but I'm not Chinese, so there you go. I might have to Google later why they find the tortoise so offensive. Sometimes homeopathic or imitative magic is called on to annul an evil omen by accomplishing it in mimicry. The effect is to circumvent destiny by substituting a mock calamity for a real one. You see that a lot in Hollywood, all these dreadful disaster movies and end of the world scenario movies and nuclear holocaust. It's like almost pre-programming so that it's already been put out into our reality. It doesn't kind of need to happen in real life. I think that's kind of the plan there. Sometimes it's predictive programming though, and shit gets a bit too real. See also the movie Them in the COVID epoch, am I right? But anyway, never mind. Happy thoughts. We must maintain the happy thoughts to build the beautiful life for me and you and everyone here on planet Earth, because we're manifesting. We're manifesting babies. In Madagascar, this mode of cheating the fates is reduced to a regular system. Here, every man's fortune is determined by the day and hour of his birth, and if that happens to be an unlucky one, his fate is sealed, unless the mischief can be extracted, as the phrase goes, by means of a substitute. The ways of extracting the mischief are various. For example, don't mind me. For example, if a man is born on the first day of the second month, February, his house will be burnt down when he comes of age. To take time by the forelock and avoid this catastrophe, the friends of the infant will set up a shed in a field or in the cattle fold and burn it. If the ceremony is to be really effective, the child and his mother should be placed in the shed and only plucked like brands from the burning hut before it is too late. Again, dripping November is the month of tears, and he who is born in it is born to sorrow. But in order to disperse the clouds that thus gather over his future, he has nothing to do but to take the lid off a boiling pot and wave it about. The drops that fall from it will accomplish his destiny and so prevent the tears from trickling from his eyes. Again, if fate has decreed that a young girl, still unwed, should see her children, still unborn, descend before her with sorrow to the grave, she can avert the calamity as follows. She kills a grasshopper, wraps it in a rag to represent a shroud, and mourns over it like Rachel, weeping for her children and refusing to be comforted. Moreover, she takes of their superfluous legs and wings. Skipped. Moreover, she takes a dozen or more grasshoppers, and having removed some of their superfluous legs and wings, she lays them about their dead and shrouded fellow. The buzz of the tortured insects and the agitated motions of their mutilated limbs represent the shrieks and contortions of the mourners at a funeral. After burying the deceased grasshopper, she leaves the rest to continue their mourning till death releases them from their pain. And, having bound up her dishevelled hair, she retires from the grave with the step and carriage of a person plunged in grief. Thenceforth, she looks cheerfully forward to seeing her children survive her, for it cannot be that she should mourn and bury them twice over. Once more, if fortune has frowned on a man at his birth, and penury has marked him for her own, he can easily erase the mark in question by purchasing a couple of cheap pearls, price 3 halfpence, and burying them. For who but the rich of this world can thus afford to fling pearls away? Something for me to think about. Number 3, contagious magic. Thus far, we have been considering chiefly that branch of sympathetic magic which may be called homeopathic or imitative. Its leading principle, as we have seen, is that like produces like, or in modern parlance, like cures like. Or, in other words, that an effect resembles its cause. The other great branch of sympathetic magic, which I have called contagious magic, proceeds upon the notion that things which have once been conjoined must remain ever afterwards, even when quite dissevered from each other, in such a sympathetic relation that whatever is done to the one must similarly affect the other. As I said, why avoid extended oxytocin bonds? It creates too much of a powerful connection, especially for me, who's a highly sensitive person, and it can be hard to break that chain if things turn ugly or go feral, rancid, as I like to use that expression, and people turn vicious. Then you don't want those kind of long-term bonds, just saying. But anyway, it is what it is. Thus, the logical basis of contagious magic, like that of homeopathic magic, is a mistaken association of ideas, its physical basis, if we may speak of such a thing. Like the physical basis of homeopathic magic, is a material medium of some sort which, like the ether of modern physics, is assumed to unite distant objects and to convey impressions from one to the other. The most familiar example of contagious magic is the magical sympathy which is supposed to exist between a man and any severed portion of his person, as his hair or nails, so that whoever gets possession of human hair or nails may work his will at any distance upon the person from whom they were cut. This superstition is worldwide. Instances of it in regard to hair and nails will be noticed later on in this work. Among the Australian tribes, it was a common practice to knock out one or more of a boy's front teeth at those ceremonies of initiation in which each male member had to submit before he could enjoy the rights and privileges of a full-grown man. The reason of the practice is obscure. All that concerns us here is the belief that a sympathetic relation continued to exist between the lad and his teeth after the latter had been extracted from his gums. Thus, among some of the tribes about the river Darling in New South Wales, the extracted tooth was placed under the bark of a tree near a river or waterhole. If the bark grew over the tooth, or if the tooth fell into the water, all was well, but if it were exposed and the ants ran over it, the natives believed that the boy would suffer from a disease of the mouth. Among the Murring and other tribes of New South Wales, The extracted tooth was first taken care of by an old man and then passed from one head man to another until it had gone all around the community. Then it came back to the lad's father and finally to the lad himself. But, however, it was thus conveyed from hand to hand. It might on no account be placed in a bag containing magical substances, for to do so would, they believed, put the owner of the tooth in great danger. The late Dr. Howitt once acted as custodian of the teeth which had been extracted from some novices at a ceremony of initiation, and the old men earnestly besought him not to carry them in a bag in which they knew that he had some quartz crystals. They declared that if he did so, the magic of the crystals would pass into the teeth, and so injure the boys. Nearly a year after Dr. Howitt's return from the ceremony, he was visited by one of the principal men of the Murring tribe, who had travelled some 250 miles from his home to fetch back the teeth. This man explained that he had been sent for them because one of the boys had fallen into ill health, and it was believed that the teeth had received some injury which had afflicted them, and he returned home bearing the teeth with him, carefully wrapped up and concealed. The Basutos are careful to conceal their extracted teeth, lest these should fall into the hands of certain mythical beings who haunt graves, and who could harm the owner of the tooth by working magic on it. In Sussex, some 50 years ago, a maidservant remonstrated strongly against the throwing away of children's cast teeth, affirming that, should they be found and gnawed by any animal, the child's new tooth would be, for all the world, like the teeth of the animal that had bitten the old one. In proof of this, she named old Master Simmons, who had a very large pig's tooth in his upper jaw, a personal defect that he always averred was caused by his mother, who threw away one of his cast teeth by accident into the hog's trough. A similar belief has led to practices intended on the principles of homeopathic magic to replace old teeth by new and better ones. Thus, in many parts of the world, it is customary to put extracted teeth in some place where they will be found by a mouse or a rat, in the hope that, through the sympathy which continues to subsist between them and their former owner, his other teeth may acquire the same firmness and excellence as the teeth of these rodents. For example, in Germany it is said to be an almost universal maxim among the people that when you've had a tooth taken, but you should insert it into a mouse's hole. To do so with a child's milk tooth which has fallen out will prevent the child from having toothache. Or you should go behind the stove and throw your tooth backwards over your head, saying, "Mouse, give me your iron tooth, I will give you my bone tooth." After that, your other teeth will remain good. Far away from Europe, at Rarotonga in the Pacific, when a child's tooth was extracted, the following prayer used to be recited. "Big rat, little rat, here is my old tooth. Pray, give me a new one." Then the tooth was thrown on the thatch of the house, because ants make their nests in the decayed thatch. The reason assigned for invoking the rats on these occasions was that rats' teeth were the strongest known to the natives. Other parts which are commonly believed to remain in a sympathetic union with the body after the physical connection has been severed are the navel string and the afterbirth, including the placenta. So intimate, indeed, is the union conceived to be, that the fortunes of the individual for good or evil throughout life are often supposed to be bound up with one or other of these portions of his person, so that if his navel string or afterbirth is preserved and properly treated, he will be prosperous, whereas if it be injured or lost, he will suffer accordingly. Thus, certain tribes of Western Australia believe that a man swims well or ill, according as his mother at his birth threw the navel string into water or not. Among the natives of the Pennefather River in Queensland, it is believed that a part of the child's spirit, Choe, stays in the afterbirth. Hence the grandmother takes the afterbirth away and buries it in the sand. She marks the spot by a number of twigs, which she sticks in the ground in a circle, tying their tops together so that the structure resembles a cone. When Anjaya, the being who causes conception in women by putting mud babies into their wombs, comes along and sees the place, he takes out the spirit and carries it away to one of his haunts, such as a tree, a hole in a rock, or a lagoon, where it may remain for years. But sometime or other he will put the spirit again into a baby, and it will be born once more into the world. In Ponape, one of the Caroline Islands, the navel string is placed in a shell and then disposed of in such a way as shall best adapt the child for the career which the parents have chosen for him. For example, if they wish to make him a good climber, they will hang the navel string on a tree. The Kei Islanders regard the navel string as the brother or sister of the child according to the sex of the infant. They put it in a pot with ashes and set it in the branches of a tree, that it may keep a watchful eye on the fortunes of its comrade. Among the Bataks of Sumatra, as among many other peoples of the Indian archipelago, the placenta passes for the child's younger brother or sister, the sex being determined by the sex of the child, and it is buried under the house. According to the Bataks, it is bound up with the child's welfare and seems, in fact, to be the seat of the transferable soul of which we shall hear something later on. The Karo Bataks even affirm that of a man's two souls, it is the true soul that lives with the placenta under the house. That is the soul, they say, which begets children. The Baganda believe that every person is born with a double, and this double they identify with the afterbirth, which they regard as a second child. The mother buries the afterbirth at the root of a plantain tree, which then becomes sacred until the fruit has ripened, when it is plucked to furnish a sacred feast for the family. Among the Cherokees, the navel string of a girl is buried under a corn mortar in order that the girl may grow up to be a good baker, but the navel string of a boy is hung up on a tree in the woods in order that he may be a hunter. The Incas of Peru preserved the navel string with the greatest care and gave it to the child to suck whenever it fell ill. Sounds a bit icky, but anyway. In ancient Mexico, they used to give a boy's navel string to soldiers to be buried by them on a field of battle in order that the boy might thus acquire a passion for war. But the navel string of a girl was buried beside the domestic hearth because this was believed to inspire her with a love of home and a taste for cooking and baking. Well, we know where my navel string ended up, don't we? Ha ha. Make love, not war, babies. Right, where are we? Even in Europe, many people still believe that a person's destiny is more or less bound up with that of his navel string or afterbirth. Thus, in Rhenish Bavaria, the navel string is kept for a while wrapped up in a piece of old linen and then cut or pricked to pieces. Actually, I don't need that one. That's ridiculous. 10 o'clock now. It's getting cooler now. Sorry, I'm moving in and out of ordinary reality and multitasking as I do. Where were we? The navel string is kept for a while wrapped up in a piece of old linen and then cut or pricked to pieces according as the child is a boy or a girl, in order that he or she may grow up to be a skillful workman or a good seamstress. Spelt sempstress. Never seen that before. Wow. Sempstress. Sempstress. No, I read it as seamstress, but I think that's what it means. In Berlin, the midwife commonly delivers the dried navel string to the father, with a strict injunction to preserve it carefully, for so long as it is kept, the child will live and thrive and be free from sickness. In Bough and Perche, the people are careful to throw the navel string neither into water nor into fire, believing that if that were done, the child would be drowned or burned. Thus, in many parts of the world, the navel string, or more commonly the afterbirth, is regarded as a living being, the brother or sister of the infant, or as the material object in which the guardian spirit of the child or part of its soul resides. Further, the sympathetic connection supposed to exist between a person and his afterbirth or navel string comes out very clearly in the widespread custom of treating the afterbirth or navel string in ways which are supposed to influence for life the character and career of the person, making him, if it is a man, a nimble climber, a strong swimmer, a skillful hunter, or a brave soldier, and making her, if it is a woman, a cunning sempstress, a good baker, and so forth. Thus the beliefs and usages concerned with the afterbirth or placenta, and to a less extent with the navel string, present a remarkable parallel to the widespread doctrine of the transferable or external soul and the custom founded on it. Hence it is hardly rash to conjecture that the resemblance is no mere chance coincidence, but that in the afterbirth or placenta we have a physical basis, not necessarily the only one, for the theory and practice of the external soul. The consideration of that subject is reserved for a later part of this work. A curious application of the doctrine of contagious magic is the relation commonly believed to exist between a wounded man and the agent of the wound, so that whatever is subsequently done by or to the agent must correspondingly affect the patient either for good or evil. Thus, Pliny tells us that if you have wounded a man and are sorry for it, you have only to spit on the hand that gave the wound, and the pain of the sufferer will be instantly alleviated. In Melanesia, if a man's friends get possession of the arrow which wounded him, they keep it in a damp place or in cool leaves, for then the inflammation will be trifling and will soon subside. Meantime, the enemy who shot the arrow is hard at work to aggravate the wound by all the means in his power. For this purpose, he and his friends drink hot burning juices and chew irritating leaves, for this will clearly inflame and irritate the wound. Further, they keep the bow near the fire to make the wound which it has inflicted hot, and for the same reason they put the arrowhead, if it has been recovered, into the fire. Moreover, they are careful to keep the bowstring taut and to twang it occasionally, for this will cause the wounded man to suffer from tension of the nerves and spasms of tetanus. It is constantly received and avouched, says Bacon, that the anointing of the weapon that maketh the wound will heal the wound itself. In this experiment upon the relation of men of credit, though myself as yet am not fully inclined to believe it, you shall note the points following. First, the ointment wherewith this is done is made of diverse ingredients, whereof the strangest and hardest to come by are the moss upon the skull of a dead man unburied, and the fats of a boar and a bear killed in the act of generation. The precious ointment compounded out of these and other ingredients was applied, as the philosopher explains, not to the wound, but to the weapon, and that even though the injured man was at a great distance and knew nothing about it. The experiment, he tells us, had been tried of wiping the ointment off the weapon without the knowledge of the person hurt, with the result that he was presently in a great rage of pain until the weapon was anointed again. Moreover, it is affirmed that if you cannot get the weapon, yet if you put an instrument of iron or wood resembling the weapon into the wound whereby it bleedeth, the anointing of that instrument will serve and work the effect. Well, that's nice, isn't it? Oh. Remedies of the sort which Bacon deemed worthy of his attention are still in vogue in the eastern counties of England. Thus in Suffolk, if a man cuts himself with a billhook or a scythe, he always takes care to keep the weapon bright and oils it to prevent the wound from festering. If he runs a thorn, or as he calls it, a bush into his hand, he oils or greases the extracted thorn. A man came to a doctor with an inflamed hand, having run a thorn into it while he was hedging. On being told that the hand was festering, he remarked, "That didn't ought to, for I greased the bush well after I pulled it out." If a horse wounds its foot by treading on a nail, a Suffolk groom will invariably preserve the nail, clean it, and grease it every day to prevent the foot from festering. Similarly, Cambridgeshire labourers think that if a horse has run a nail into its foot, it is necessary to grease the nail with lard or oil and put it away in some safe place, or the horse will not recover. A few years ago, a veterinary surgeon was sent for to attend a horse which had ripped its side open on the hinge of a farm gatepost. On arriving at the farm, he found that nothing had been done to the wounded horse, but that a man was busy trying to prise the hinge out of the gatepost in order that it might be greased and put away, which in the opinion of the Cambridge wiseacres would conduce to the recovery of the animal. Similarly, Essex rustics opine that, if a man has been stabbed with a knife, it is essential to his recovery that the knife should be greased and ouch, and laid. Speaking of being stabbed, my back just went. I actually heard it, my God. The knife should be greased and laid across the bed on which the sufferer is lying. So in Bavaria, you are directed to anoint a linen rag with grease and tie it on the edge of the axe that cut you, taking care to keep the sharp edge upwards. As the grease on the axe dries, your wound heals. Similarly, in the Harz Mountains they say that if you cut yourself, you ought to smear the knife or the scissors with fat and put the instrument away in a dry place, in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Ghost. As the knife dries, the wound heals. Other people, however, in Germany, say that you should stick the knife in some damp place in the ground, and that your hurt will heal as the knife rusts. Others again, in Bavaria, recommend you to smear the axe or whatever it is with blood and put it under the eaves. The train of reasoning which thus commends itself to English and German rustics, in common with the savages of Melanesia and America, I hate that word. If I call you a savage, I'm giving you like the worst fucking insult. It's grinding my gears. Anyway, is carried a step farther by the Aborigines of Central Australia, who conceive that under certain circumstances the near relations of a wounded man must grease themselves, restrict their diet, and regulate their behaviour in other ways in order to ensure his recovery. Thus, when a lad has been circumcised and the wound is not yet healed, his mother may not eat opossum, or a certain kind of lizard, or carpet snake, or any kind of fat, for otherwise she would retard the healing of the boy's wound. Every day she greases her digging sticks and never lets them out of her sight. At night she sleeps with them close to her head. No one is allowed to touch them. Every day also she rubs her body all over with grease, as in some way this is believed to help her son's recovery. Another refinement of the same principle is due to the ingenuity of the German peasant. It is said that when one of his pigs or sheep breaks its leg, a farmer of Rhenish Bavaria, I think meaning that they live along the Rhine, or Hesse, will bind up the leg of a chair with bandages and splints in due form. For some days thereafter, no one may sit on that chair, move it, or knock up against it, for to do so would pain the injured pig or sheep and hinder the cure. In this last case it is clear that we have passed wholly out of the region of contagious magic and into the region of homeopathic or imitative magic, the chair leg which is treated instead of the beast's leg. In no sense belongs to the animal, and the application of bandages to it is a mere simulation of the treatment which a more rational surgery would bestow on the real patient. The sympathetic connection supposed to exist between a man and the weapon which has wounded him is probably founded on the notion that the blood on the weapon continues to feel with the blood in his body. For a like reason, the Papuans of Tunleo, an island off New Guinea, are careful to throw into the sea the bloody bandages with which their wounds have been dressed, for they fear that if these rags fell into the hands of an enemy, he might injure them magically thereby. Once when a man with a wound in his mouth which bled constantly came to the missionaries to be treated, his faithful wife took great pains to collect all the blood and cast it into the sea. Strained and unnatural as this idea may seem to us, it is perhaps less so than the belief that magic sympathy is maintained between a person and his clothes, so that whatever is done to the clothes will be felt by the man himself, even though he may be far away at the time. In the Wotjobaluk tribe of Victoria, a wizard would sometimes get hold of a man's opossum rug and roast it slowly in the fire. I think by wizard they mean Kadachi man. And as he did so, the owner of the rug would fall sick. If the wizard consented to undo the charm, he would give the rug back to the sick man's friends, bidding them put it in water so as to wash the fire out. When that happened, the sufferer would feel a refreshing coolness and probably recover. In Tanna, one of the New Hebrides, a man who had a grudge at another and desired his death would try to get possession of a cloth which had touched the sweat of his enemy's body. If he succeeded, he rubbed the cloth carefully over with the leaves and twigs of a certain tree, rolled and bound cloth, twigs, and leaves into a long sausage-shaped bundle and burned it slowly in the fire. As the bundle was consumed, the victim fell ill, and when it was reduced to ashes, he died. In this last form of enchantment, however, the magical sympathy may be supposed to exist not so much between the man and the cloth as between the man and the sweat which issued from his body. I really hate it when I get sweated on by other people. Yuck. But in other cases of the same sort, it seems that the garment by itself is enough to give the sorcerer a hold upon his victim. The witch in Theocritus, while she melted an image or lump of wax in order that her faithless lover might melt with love of her, did not forget to throw into the fire a shred of his cloak which he had dropped in her house. In Prussia they say that if you cannot catch a thief, the next best thing you can do is get hold of a garment which he may have shed in his flight, for if you beat it soundly, the thief will fall sick. This belief is firmly rooted in the popular mind. Some 80 or 90 years ago, in the neighbourhood of Beirut, a man was detected trying to steal honey and fled, leaving his coat behind him. When he heard that the enraged owner of the honey was mauling his lost coat, he was so alarmed that he took to his bed and died. Again, magic may be wrought on a man sympathetically, not only through his clothes and severed parts of himself, but also through the instruments left by his body in sand or earth. In particular, it is a worldwide superstition that by injuring foot imprints, you injure the feet that made them. Thus, the natives of southeastern Australia think that they can lame a man by placing sharp pieces of quartz, glass, bone, or charcoal in his footprints. Rheumatic pains are often attributed by them to this cause. Seeing a Tatangolang man very lame, Mr. Howitt asked him what was the matter. He said, "Some fellow has put bottle in my foot." He was suffering from rheumatism, but believed that an enemy had found his foot track and had buried in it a piece of broken bottle, the magical influence of which had entered his foot. Similar practices prevail in various parts of Europe. Thus in Mecklenburg it is thought that if you drive a nail into a man's footprint, he will fall lame. Sometimes it is required that the nail should be taken from a coffin. A like mode of injuring an enemy is resorted to in some parts of France. It is said that there was an old woman who used to frequent Stowe in Suffolk, and she was a witch. If, while she walked, anyone went after her and struck a nail or a knife into her footprint in the dust, the dame could not stir a step till it was withdrawn. Among the South Slavs, a girl will dig up the earth from the footprints of the man she loves and put it in a flower pot. Then she plants in the pot a marigold, a flower that is thought to be fadeless. And as its golden blossom grows and blooms and never fades, so shall her sweetheart's love grow and bloom and never, never fade. Thus the love spell acts on the man through the earth he trod on. An old Danish mode of concluding a treaty was based on the same idea of the sympathetic connection between a man and his footprints. The covenanting parties sprinkled each other's footprints with their own blood, thus giving a pledge of fidelity. In ancient Greece, superstitions of the same sort seem to have been current, for it was thought that if a horse stepped on the track of a wolf, he was seized with numbness, and a maxim ascribed to Pythagoras forbade people to pierce a man's footprints with a nail or a knife. The same superstition is turned to account by hunters in many parts of the world for the purpose of running down the game. Thus a German huntsman will stick a nail taken from a coffin into the fresh spoor of the quarry, believing that this will hinder the animal from escaping. The Aborigines of Victoria put hot embers in the tracks of the animals they were pursuing. Hottentot hunters throw into the air a handful of sand taken from the footprints of the game, believing that this will bring the animal down. Thompson Indians used to lay charms on the tracks of wounded deer. After that, they deemed it superfluous to pursue the animal any further that day, for being thus charmed, it could not travel far and would soon die. Similarly, Ojibwe Indians placed medicine on the track of the first deer or bear they met with, supposing that this would soon bring the animal into sight, even if it were 2 or 3 days' journey off. For this charm, had power to compress a journey of several days into a few hours. You hunters of West Africa stabbed the footprints of game with a sharp-pointed stick in order to maim the quarry and allow them to come up with it. But though the footprint is the most obvious, it is not the only impression made by the body through which magic may be wrought on a man. The Aborigines of southeastern Australia believe that a man may be injured by burying sharp fragments of quartz, glass, and so forth in the mark made by his reclining body. The magical virtue of these sharp things enters his body and causes those acute pains which the ignorant European puts down to rheumatism. We can now understand why it was a maxim with the Pythagoreans, got there in the end, that in rising from bed you should smooth away the impression left by your body on the bedclothes. The rule was simply an old precaution against magic, forming part of a whole code of superstitious maxims, which antiquity fathered on Pythagoras, though doubtless they were familiar to the barbarous forefathers of the Greeks, long before the time of that philosopher. Number 4. The Magician's Progress. We have now concluded our examination of the general principles of sympathetic magic. The examples by which I have illustrated them have been drawn for the most part from what may be called private magic, that is, from magical rites and incantations practiced for the benefit or the injury of individuals. But in savage society there is commonly to be found in addition what we may call public magic, that is, sorcery practiced for the benefit of the whole community. Wherever ceremonies of this sort are observed for the common good, it is obvious that the magician ceases to be merely a private practitioner and becomes to some extent a public functionary. The development of such a class of functionaries is of great importance for the political as well as the religious evolution of society. For when the welfare of the tribe is supposed to depend on the performance of these magical rites, the magician rises into a position of much influence and repute, and may readily acquire the rank and authority of a chief or king. The profession accordingly draws into its ranks some of the ablest and most ambitious men of the tribe, because it holds out to them a prospect of honour, wealth, and power such as hardly any other career could offer. The acuter minds perceive how easy it is to dupe their weaker brother and to play on his superstition for their own advantage. Not that the sorcerer is always a knave and impostor. He is often sincerely convinced that he really possesses those wonderful powers which the credulity of his fellows ascribes to him. But the more sagacious he is, the more likely he is to see through the fallacies which impose on duller wits. Thus the ablest members of the profession must tend to be more or less conscious deceivers, and it is just these men who, in virtue of their superior ability, will generally come to the top and win for themselves positions of the highest dignity and the most commanding authority. The pitfalls which beset the path of the professional sorcerer are many, and as a rule, only the man of coolest head and sharpest wit will be able to steer his way through them safely. For it must always be remembered that every single profession and claim put forward by the magician as such is false. Not one of them can be maintained without deception, conscious or unconscious. Accordingly, the sorcerer who sincerely believes in his own extravagant pretensions is in far greater peril and is much more likely to be cut short in his career than the deliberate impostor. The honest wizard always expects that his charms and incantations will produce their supposed effect, and when they fail, not only really, as they always do, but conspicuously and disastrously, as they often do, he is taken aback. He is not, like his knavish colleague, ready with a plausible excuse to account for the failure, and before he can find one, he may be knocked on the head by his disappointed and angry employers. The general result is that at this stage of social evolution, the supreme power tends to fall into the hands of men of the keenest intelligence and the most unscrupulous character. If we could balance the harm they do by their knavery against the benefits they confer by their superior sagacity, it might well be found that the good greatly outweighed the evil. For more mischief has probably been wrought in the world by honest fools in high places than by intelligent rascals. Once your shrewd rogue has attained the height of his ambition and has no longer any selfish end to further, he may, and often does, turn his talents, his experience, his resources to the service of the public. Many men who have been least scrupulous in the acquisition of power have been most beneficent in the use of it, whether the power they aimed at and won was that of wealth, political authority, or what not. In the field of politics, the wily intriguer, the ruthless victor, may end by being a wise and magnanimous ruler, blessed in his lifetime, lamented at his death, admired and applauded by posterity. Such men, to take two of the most conspicuous instances, were Julius Caesar and Augustus. But once a fool, always a fool, and the greater the power in his hands, the more disastrous is likely to be the use he makes of it. The heaviest calamity in English history, the breach with America, might never have occurred if George III had not been an honest dullard. Thus, so far as the public profession of magic affected the constitution of savage society, it tended to place the control of affairs in the hands of the ablest man. It shifted the balance of power from the many to the one. It substituted a monarchy for a democracy, or rather for an oligarchy of old men. For in general, the savage community is ruled not by the whole body of adult males, but by a council of elders. The change, by whatever causes produced, and whatever the character of the early rulers, was on the whole very beneficial. For the rise of monarchy appears to be an essential condition of the emergence of mankind from savagery. No human being is so hidebound by custom and tradition as your democratic savage. In no state of society, consequently, is progress so slow and difficult. The old notion that the savage is the freest of mankind is the reverse of the truth. He is a slave, not indeed to a visible master, but to the past, to the spirits of his dead forefathers, who haunt his steps from birth to death and rule him with a rod of iron. Which they did is the pattern of right, the unwritten law to which he yields a blind, unquestioning obedience. The least possible scope is thus afforded to superior talent to change old customs for the better. The ablest man is dragged down by the weakest and dullest, who necessarily sets the standard, since he cannot rise while the other can fall. We saw that with all our global politicians enabling a certain atrocity on our planet, did we not? Astonishing it was to watch them every day, their news broadcast, complete fools and dullards, enablers and henchmen and women. We can still name them, can't we? They've all conveniently retired from political service now, like the cowardly dogs they are. The surface of such a society presents a uniform dead level, so far as it is humanly possible to reduce the normal inequalities, the immeasurable real differences of inborn capacity and temper, to a false superficial appearance of equality. From this low and stagnant condition of affairs, which demagogues and dreamers in later times have lauded as the ideal state, the golden age of humanity, everything that helps to raise society by opening a career to talent and proportioning the degrees of authority to men's natural abilities, deserves to be welcomed by all who have the real good of their fellows at heart. Once these elevating influences have begun to operate, and they cannot be forever suppressed, the progress of civilization becomes comparatively rapid. Not when you promote something that is anti-humanist and leads to the death of our destruction of even our children. It's appalling. What the hell? Anyway, the rise of one man to supreme power enables him to carry through changes in a single lifetime, which previously many generations might not have sufficed to effect. And if, as will often happen, he is a man of intellect and energy above the common, he will readily avail himself of the opportunity. Even the whims and caprices of a tyrant may be of service in breaking the chain of custom which lies so heavy on the savage. And, as soon as the tribe ceases to be swayed by the timid and divided counsels of the elders, and yields to the direction of a single strong and resolute mind, it becomes formidable to its neighbours and enters on a career of aggrandizement, which, at an early stage of history, is often highly favourable to social, industrial, and intellectual progress. For extending its sway, partly by force of arms, partly by the voluntary submission of weaker tribes, the community soon acquires wealth and slaves, which of both, by relieving some classes from the perpetual struggle for a bare subsistence, afford them an opportunity of devoting themselves to that disinterested pursuit of knowledge, which is the noblest and most powerful instrument to ameliorate the lot of man. Intellectual progress, which reveals itself in the growth of art and science and the spread of more liberal views, cannot be dissociated from industrial economic progress, and that in its turn receives an immense impulse from conquest and empire. It is no mere accident that the most vehement outbursts of activity of the human mind have followed close on the heels of victory, and that the great conquering races of the world have commonly done most to advance and spread civilization, thus healing in peace the wounds they inflicted in war. Well, ask any Indigenous peoples about that, about the British colonialism. I don't think they'd agree with his ideas at all. The Babylonians, the Greeks, the Romans, the Arabs are our witnesses in the past. We may yet live to see a similar outburst in Japan. Nor, astonishingly, he was a little bit prescient there, given, the attack on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, which ended the war in Japan, but yet brought great prosperity in the ensuing decades to Japan. Nor, to remount the stream of history to its sources, is it an accident that all the first great strides towards civilization have been made under despotic and theocratic governments like those of Egypt, Babylon, and Peru, where the supreme ruler claimed and received the servile allegiance of his subjects in the double character of a king and a god. It is hardly too much to say that at this early epoch despotism is the best friend of humanity and, paradoxical as it may sound, of liberty. For after all, there is, I don't necessarily agree with this, by the way, that's why I'm frowning and pausing. For after all, there is more liberty in the best sense, liberty to think our own thoughts and to fashion our own destinies under the most absolute despotism, the most grinding tyranny, than under the apparent freedom of savage life, where the individual's lot is cast from the cradle to the grave in the iron mould of hereditary custom. So far, therefore, as the public profession of magic has been one of the roads by which the ablest men have passed to supreme power, it has contributed to emancipate mankind from the thraldom of tradition and to elevate them into a larger, freer life with a broader outlook on the world. This is no small service rendered to humanity, and when we remember further that in another direction magic has paved the way for science, we are forced to admit that if the black art has done much evil, it has also been the source of much good, that if it is the child of error, it has yet been the mother of freedom and truth. Thus concludes Chapter 3 of Sympathetic Magic, written by Sir James George Fraser and the Golden Bough. So, yes, lots to consider given our modern contemporary society is completely breaking down as I perceive it, and obviously I'm not happy about it because I've been watching it devolve since really, the early 90s. So it's a bit astonishing, but magic happens, babies, and together as a human species, we will keep fighting forward every day in every way, loving each other and supporting each other and growing each other and creating a beautiful life for each other and holding our own and staying human no matter what, no matter who, no matter when. And those of us afflicted by the effects of a certain biological weapon will have to work hard at healing themselves from that and, as I say, building a beautiful life for ourselves and resting enjoyment in what's left of our lives. Hold true like glue to those you love and who love you back with great honour and integrity and joy and delight. And if you have a lover or partner, with great passion and romance as well. And if you don't, keep dreaming of your beautiful life with a beautiful partner. It could manifest one day. And if it doesn't, live your best life every single day as I do, enjoying life and all its varied, miraculous, fractalized, sometimes sparkly, effervescent ways. And love is the law, love under rule. So, bye for now, my darlings, and blessed be from Titania's realm at Sacred Space.